remotely. As is our custom, we'll begin by a invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. This is a particularly, while we've had a dozen or so pastors lead us and several dozen youngsters lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, this is a unique day today because this is the first father-daughter team we have here. So I want you to welcome Reverend Trey Major from the Village Chapel, who will give us the invocation, and that will be followed by his daughter Kinsey, who's a third grader, though she's pointed out to me she's going into the fourth grade next year, and she celebrates her birthday later this month. So Trey, please come forward, and Kinsey, you are on deck.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we as a community thank you for your blessings upon us. Help us to see your work in this world and in this community, and may we all seek for the peace of our village. We thank you for this council and the responsibility that you have placed upon each of them. We ask that as they continue this much needed work, you would bless them and their families in accordance with your will. Help them to be good stewards of this community, and may they work swiftly and efficiently during this meeting tonight. We also ask that you would continue to bless our community, a community that strives for excellence, beauty, justice, and peace. We ask that you would be with our first responders, our police and fire departments, be with their families as they sacrifice for others. Bless our doctors and nurses and those who tend to our physical needs. We pray you watch over and be with all those who serve the people of Pinehurst. Bless our clergy and our churches, that your name may be exalted through our words and actions, and that we would be known for our kindness, charity, and joy. We pray all these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you. Amen. Now I'll ask everyone to please rise as Kinsey will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Go ahead, Kinsey.
Ready, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, father and daughter. Okay, let us continue. As we traditionally begin with reports from the village manager and members of the council. So we'll begin with Doug Willardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is the season of events for us. So we had our matinee races this past Saturday. And then this Friday, we kick off our first Live After 5 concert that will be in the Arboretum here. And then on Saturday is our Easter egg hunting contest and search. So that is at the Cannon Park, and that starts at 10:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. So they do it in phases, so youngsters are at 10:30. So if you have kids different ages, you should check our website to see when your kids' ages are set to start. And then we have our farmers market, which returns to Tufts Park this Saturday. So it will run through the summer, Saturdays at 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., and then Wednesdays from 3 to 6 p.m. And then also, a couple of weeks ago, we received this ETC Institute Award. So ETC is our survey company that we use, and they do hundreds, perhaps even thousands of surveys for different municipalities across the country. And we were the top 10% of all governments in the United States. So they sent this to us, and it's nice to be recognized for the good work that our staff does here in the village. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations to you, Doug, and the village staff on achieving that award. Top 10% is there's a lot of governments in this country, so that's quite an accomplishment. A few things I wanted to mention. This past week, I attended the More 100 member meeting where they briefed us on some of the activities that are going on regarding economic development, and got to meet with some of my colleagues from other towns and municipalities. I attended the planning and zoning meeting that was held last week, and there was quite a turnout there because there's a lot of activity going on in the village, particularly a lot of residents from Pine Wild, and so we should certainly be alert to all the comings and goings of that's happening both everywhere, and particularly Pine Wild, as they have a variety of sort of construction-related events taking place. I also attended with some of my colleagues the ribbon cutting at Racy Wicker Park, the ball field behind the firehouse, and we have a terrific new synthetic surf park there. Looks very professional, and congratulations to those folks, Parks and Rec in particular, who have seen that through for this past year or so. And I'm sure, just like the earlier work done at Cannon Park, it will also become a destination for a lot of particularly young people for a lot of different athletic events. I don't think anybody on the council went to the University of Florida, but I guess you all know the outcome of that, and so we'll just leave that alone, since there are some North Carolina fans who may be a little concerned about the outcome. Having said that, I will now go to Dr. Morgan.
Thank you. Just a couple things. Number one, congratulations to the entire staff on the ETC award. Well deserved, and reflecting the great efforts that we see on a regular basis, but it's nice to be recognized for that, so congratulations on that. Also, recognition to the Parks and Rec side of the house here for the matinee races. Lots of excellent feedback on that and how well that all went down, so thank you very much. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilman Taylor.
I attended the SMPO Technical Coordinating Committee meeting. There is no meeting of the full governing board this month, but they continue to make progress on, as you would expect, some technical issues that will ultimately come back before the board. I was also at the ribbon cutting at Racy Wicker Park. I thought it was spoke to a number of parents there who coach different sports that have used the park or are interested in using the park. I think this is going to be a terrific addition, to the extent that it is all weather, short of an absolute monsoon. It drains well, and I think we're going to see increased usage of that as we go forward. I was also asked, pursuant to the discussion we had at the Neighborhood Advisory Council 2 meetings ago on the deer culling, the Property Owners Committee at CCNC asked me to come out and take them through some of the details. And the NAC rep had also been in touch with people at Forest Creek who've been doing this, I understand now, for 10 years. And so had some specific, although only on land out there controlled by the management organization, not on any private land. So it was a good dialogue. I think they have identified some areas out there that might make sense, which are really not so much in the residential areas, and so that was a good thing. I think that's it.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ficklin.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. We attended the Beautification Committee meeting yesterday, welcoming 3 new conditional members, which was delightful. We had a very interesting conversation around spring and beautification and the massive effort that goes on in this community to make it so beautiful in the spring. And it starts now with Mother Nature's contribution, but there are literally hundreds of people who are involved in making springtime explode around here in a beautiful way. And that goes from people who, from the staff, Public Works, from Parks and Rec, to all of the people who are in the garden clubs, to all of the neighborhoods who do wonderful jobs decorating their entrances to the resort, to the USGA, to everyone. It is truly spectacular. So appreciate it, and beginning on April 20th, the flower rollout begins, and goes on for about a month. So be sure to take it all in and enjoy it at this beautiful time of year. The only other thing I was going to mention is another Saturday event downtown, which is the Dog Dash. So it, I believe, starts at 10 a.m. Yes, meeting at Tufts Park for a walk through Old Town. It's called a dash, but it's really a slow walk. And you start going through Old Town from Tufts Park and end up at Tufts Park with your pup in hand, hopefully. And also you will get a little bag of goodies to enjoy along the way. So
What day is that? Do you remember?
Saturday,
This
this Saturday, the 12th, yes. And that's it for me, thank you.
Councilman Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I was at the spring matinee races last Saturday. Was indeed a beautiful day in Pinehurst. I think that's the operative word. Want to thank all the people who made it happen, the Pinehurst Driving Club and the Preferred Equine Group, who was the corporate sponsor. The Parks and Rec Department did a fabulous job, along with the staff and the staff that takes care of the harness track. The Pinehurst Police Department, as always, kept things moving, and there was no issues to my knowledge. It worked out very well. The Pinecrest High School ROTC was the color guard, very impressive, did a great job there, along with the 82nd Airborne All-American Chorus. They did the national anthem and some other renditions. It was very impressive, to tell you the truth. And there was actually dozens of other individuals and organizations, along with the welcome by our village manager, set off the day. Good job. And to my knowledge, the village may have reaped a small profit from all the merchandise that Ashley and her friendly volunteers were selling at the BOP tent. Thank you very much. I'd like to go off script a little bit on that and kind of editorialize a little bit. Being at the harness track and the matinee races, I just started to realize what a very special and unique asset that entire complex is to the village of Pinehurst. The harness track, the 1 mile track, the fair barn, and everything else to do with it is very, very special. And we really owe a debt of gratitude to the citizens of Pinehurst who some 33 years ago made the decision to avoid the development that was planning on that area and go ahead and buy that property for the future generations. And I think it's important to reflect back on that and how valuable and special that is, along with many of the other special parts that are here in Pinehurst. So I just sort of got nostalgic a little bit on that one, but I think we are the custodians of some of this facility, and we have to make sure we understand we are only the custodians, and we do the best job we can to leave it for future generations. That's it. Enough said.
Thanks for sharing that, Jack. Good point. All right, that concludes our reports, unless anyone has anything else to add. And we'll go to item 4 on our agenda, which is the motion to approve the consent agenda. Now, all these items listed on the consent agenda are considered routine or have been discussed at length in previous meetings and will be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion will be held unless requested by a member of the village council. We will be approving the March 25th regular meeting minutes from our council meeting, and of course the March 22nd work session minutes. So I will entertain a thought or a motion.
I had one minor correction, if you don't mind.
Please.
And I discussed this with Doug beforehand. On the work session minutes under item B, the conclusion, and this was on the section that I led on capital planning process, the conclusion was Council Mr. Willardson agreed to take steps to improve communication and collaboration on capital projects. I don't think that's accurate. Number one, I don't think there is a communication issue. And I talked with Doug about that. I don't think he feels there's one either. I thought what we basically agreed was that he was going to take a look for a couple of projects that are already on the in the capital budget and decide whether they might be conducive to the process that I outlined. I think that's that's a somewhat substantive change, and I think the record should reflect that, not something which I don't think we discussed and which I don't think is a problem.
Do you have suggested wording that you'd like us to substitute, or? Doug, do you?
Councilman, Doug, I would be happy to defer to you, or I'll make a suggestion.
Your suggestion will be better than mine, so.
Okay. Councilor Mr. Willardson agreed to select one or two projects from the existing capital budgeting decision to explore using the process that Councilman Taylor outlined.
Okay. Is that the consensus that that's all right?
That's fine.
Then we can have a motion that includes the amendment offered by Mr. Taylor.
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda with amended agreements.
Second.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adopted as amended. Thank you, John and council members. That takes us, that ends the consent agenda. Now we go to a proclamation. Doug, why don't you give us a little lead-in, and then I'll be glad to read the proclamation.
Great, thank you. So April 18th marks the 250th anniversary of Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. So there is an initiative to have two lights shine from each of our municipal buildings, or maybe some of our municipal buildings, and also to encourage the public to put two lights in their homes as well. So this is part of the ongoing commemoration of the 250th anniversary of the birth of our country that will happen next year. But we want to join part of it, and we are going to put two lights in our watchtower. Hopefully Paul Revere will be able to see them from across the
Good.
Charles River, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay,
So is it one by sea and two by,
One if by land, two if by sea.
see, that's
Okay,
right.
got it.
Was that, do you know the poem well enough to recite it, Jack?
no, sorry.
Okay, all right. All right, well, with that, I will read the proclamation. And I'm glad to see that we as a community, and I hope other communities are following, are beginning this celebration of the 250th anniversary. Because it's a bit of a historical lesson for a lot of folks, and it reminds us how everything sort of started. And a lot of it did start in North Carolina, because through the Revolutionary War. So whereas the Village of Pinehurst recognizes the importance of commemorating the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, a milestone embodying our nation's founding ideals of equality, liberty, and justice, whereas on the night of April 18th, 1775, Boston silversmith Paul Revere rode to Lexington, Massachusetts, warning Samuel Adams and John Hancock of the approaching British forces, a pivotal moment that helped to ignite the American Revolution. And whereas Paul Revere, in the steeple of Boston's Old North Church, two single signal lanterns shone in keeping with the one if by land and two if by sea code of the American Revolutionary Forces. And whereas the actions of Paul Revere and fellow riders William Dawes and Dr. Samuel Prescott exemplified the spirit of community and shared responsibility that has defined our nation since inception. And whereas the Two Lights for Tomorrow initiative, a nationwide campaign to commemorate the 250th birthday of the United States of America, unites us in remembrance of our shared history, honoring the sacrifices made by those who fought for our independence and the values we hold dear. Whereas, as part of the Two Lights for Tomorrow initiative, the Village of Pinehurst will display two lights in Village Hall and other Village of Pinehurst buildings on April 18th, 2025, to honor and draw inspiration from Paul Revere's historic ride to unite Americans in reflection, celebration, and service. And whereas the Village of Pinehurst Council encourages all residents and businesses within the Village of Pinehurst to participate by displaying two lights as a visible symbol of our unity, remembrance, and hope for tomorrow, as mayor of the Village of Pinehurst, I do hereby proclaim April 18th, Two Lights for Tomorrow Day in the Village of Pinehurst. And if you're not really psyched about the Declaration of Independence, I think we should have at least recognized Samuel Adams for all the things that has happened since that ride, and maybe toast a glass of beer to him. So I'll look for a, well, I guess do we need a motion to approve this?
No, for a mayoral proclamation. So
Okay.
you're proclaiming it.
Okay, it's so proclaimed, and therefore, so be it. Thank you.
I would just add, both for several years while I was in college and for 3 years after I graduated, I had reason to be up in Lexington, not infrequently. And later, when my son got to be somewhere in his mid-teens, we actually drove to Lexington and walked most of the way from Lexington out to Concord along the Paul Revere Trail. I was surprised to see this on our agenda. I think it's a great idea, and it's, if you read the history of that night, it's actually even more interesting than Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's famous poem. But I'm glad to see us doing this.
Good. I'd also like to point out that the north end of Boston has some of the finest Italian restaurants you can ever eat at. So if you're up there, stop by. All right.
Oh, not to drag this out.
Yeah, go ahead.
But
I'm sorry I started this.
I just wanted to mention that I've had conversations with the National Park Service, who is very excited, obviously, about the 250th anniversary. And they have been communicating as to whether there is anything that we feel that we can contribute towards that. Of course, being founded in 1895, we're a little late to the game, but they still are looking for possible connections between the area and/or the village and the commemorative work to go on next year. So I thought I'd bring that up.
The only thing I know is that Moore County is actually named after a Mr. Moore who participated in the Revolutionary War. I can't recall it all, but I remember reading something about it. I don't know if anyone else wants to fill in that blank. So that's one item.
But we'll keep an eye on that one.
Well, we will. Okay. All right. On to resolutions. Item 7.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, public comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped 6, which I certainly don't want to do that. Public comments. Item 6. This is the portion of our program where I don't know if anyone signed up to make any. No. But if anyone would care to who has not signed up, we welcome them. You just come forth, identify yourself. I see one gentleman. And let us know what the topic is, and take about 3 minutes or so, and we'll listen to you.
So much. Daniel May, a resident of Village Acres, here just to speak on behalf of the short-term rental issue. I understand that there's many in our community who have concerns about the short-term rentals and the impact that they have on our community. However, I believe that this is an issue that does bring to question the liberties of all in some of the decisions that are being made. So my concerns being that the efforts to correct the situation are being outsourced to a Washington, D.C. company, Granicus, rather than engaging with our own citizens. This decision disregards the valuable insights within our community and sidelines the residents in favor of external consultants at the expense of the community. In further disregard for our community involvement, the ordinance that was put into place did not notify those involved, but rather we are moving towards using this Granicus to enforce that policy rather than having given the residents an opportunity to correct or be compliant with the ordinance. So this does create an atmosphere of uncertainty, and so additionally, there has been an assertion that because there's no lawsuits against this ordinance, therefore the ordinance must be permissible. I think this is a bad precedent to set. There is also has been comments that a single ordinance, if this ordinance cannot be enforced, then that may imply that other ordinances cannot be enforced. I believe this is flawed logic and undermines the credibility of this council. due to this overstep, I do believe that state intervention may be necessary to correct what I believe is an infringement on the short-term rentals. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Anybody else have a comment they'd like to make? Yes, gentleman right there, Mr. Hines, I believe. No.
Mayor, I came down because I can't stay for the work session, and I wanted to be heard with respect to the Granicus report, the preliminary data that we've received. I'm not sure that this gentleman has it entirely correct. Granicus is not an enforcement arm. Granicus is, in fact, a data gathering organization that hopefully will provide us with information that will enable us to assess the enforceability and the extent to which our ordinance needs to be enforced.
What? Please, allow the speaker to speak. Go right ahead, continue.
Thank you. That said, I was, I guess, a Granicus skeptic when the idea first came along because I didn't think that it was going to provide anything. I guess intuitively, I just believed that it was not going to provide anything that we weren't going to be able to gather for ourselves. As it turns out, from what I've seen preliminarily, they're able to examine a much broader universe of STR data than certainly I could have or anybody that I know could have. And I'm hopeful that this data will lead us to some conclusions that will help us enforce our ordinance. It appears to me that they've done at least a preliminary job of identifying the universe of STRs, those that were in operation before the effective date of the ordinance, which we can ignore because they're legal, those that may not have been in operation before the effective date of the ordinance, and we can nail that down, and those will be in violation of the ordinance, and then we can take up the question of enforcement. I look forward to seeing that information further distilled and some of the open issues that exist with respect to the preliminary information closed. But in the meantime, I guess I'd take it upon myself to remind Council that the Granicus data has nothing to do with the operational or health and safety provisions of the ordinance, and that sooner or later we're going to have to turn to the question of how we enforce those, and overarchingly we're going to have to turn to the question of how we enforce the ordinance itself when it comes to those that are in violation. Parenthetically, I would add that in an example of virtue being its own reward, as I said, I came down here because I can't stay for the work session, but I haven't watched the NCAA championship game. I recorded it, and now I guess I don't need to. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I should have provided a spoiler alert for you. All righty. Is there anybody else who, yes, please come forward. State your name.
Colette Klinsky, 25 Queens Court. In reference to the gentleman's comments, before that ordinance went into effect, we had so many meetings and so many people were allowed to speak. And during that one, I gave my 3 minutes in full, saying that part of the STR problem is the fact that in 1926, the Supreme Court put in zoning effects to say that the property rights of others cannot violate the property rights of those already existence, loosely interpreted, but he can look it up. And the fact is that if anybody wants to take in a question that we made the council made the right decision, all you have to do is go on YouTube, look up real estate STRs, and see that they are among the most foreclosed properties in the last year, and they have suffered some very hard problems. And not just in the United States, but around the world, most major cities are putting in STR restrictions. So that's just adding to what I made for all those other comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colette. Not hearing from anybody else, we will move on to item 7, resolutions. The first one to consider is 2512, an appointment of Mr. Jim Rooney to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee from Pinehurst Trace. Doug, you want to say?
Yeah, Mr. Rooney was appointed by the Pinehurst Trace Association, and they would like him to fill the position of Balkanovic or something like that. And so we are excited to have Jim join us, and we're sad to have Ed leave us, but I think Jim will do a great job. He's attended the last couple of meetings, and we believe he'll do a great job.
Okay, that's terrific. Jim, if you want to come up and tell us a little bit about yourself so the community knows who's joining the Neighborhood Advisory Committee.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, Council, members of the village, Jim Rooney. I've been a member of the community for 6 years, living in Pinehurst Trace, formerly from South Carolina and New York State, retired utility employee, and right now my hobbies are doing nothing. I got all day to go no place. For letting me be part of the community.
Appreciate your desire to serve. Thank you very much. All right, unless anyone has any other questions, we can entertain a resolution to move forward on this appointment.
I move to approve Resolution 2512, appointing Mr. Jim Rooney to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, Pinehurst Trace, effective April 8th, 2025, said term to expire June 30th, 2027.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion adopted. Congratulations, Jim Rooney. We'll be seeing you. Item B on this, this is Resolution 25-09, authorizing the sale of certain real property at public auction. So, Doug, is that going to be you leading that? Go ahead.
Yep. So last time we talked about some surplus property that the village owns. This is one of those lots, and we were contacted by one of the neighbors that would like to purchase it. So we bring before council. In order to go through that process, we need to declare it surplus and have an auction. So 1755 is the lot that is in question. We've looked at it. I talked with Mike Apke, our Public Services Director. He agrees there's no need for the village to own this lot. So we propose that it be sold at auction. Auction will have to be open for 30 days. And we have on here the rules and the necessary requirements of any buyers. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but look to
Yeah, I just have one question. I don't see it. What's the size of this lot?
It's an R10, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's less than a half acre for sure.
That's what I was looking for. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
So the receiving bids, do we receive sealed bids, or are they public, like on the courthouse steps or something to that effect, or what is it? How does that work?
So I'm actually trying to remember. Is it all online? Yeah, so it's an online service that the bidder will do. So they'll bid online. At the end of the 30 days of the bidding period, we'll receive who is the highest bidder. We'll bring it back to council at that point, and you get to approve it.
Okay.
So you'll know what price it is before we actually sell it.
Okay, thank you.
But during the auction process, is the current highest bid displayed? If I had interest in buying this, do I know what I have to bid? Or?
Yes, it is.
Obviously, there's no guarantee that the resident who expressed interest in it, he may not be the high bidder.
That's true. But if he's motivated, he can stay on top of it. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
This is not like a foreclosure where there can be an upset later on, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think that concludes that discussion. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 25-09, authorizing the sale of the Village of Pinehurst-owned vacant lot located at 1755 Longleaf Drive East, parcel ID number 000233723, Unit 9, Lot 365, PH1, at public auction.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted. All right. Now we go to item 8, regular business for the council to consider. Item A is review and consider bids for the Juniper Creek Boulevard Sidewalk Project. So, Mike Apke, please lead us.
Well, I don't want to take away Mike's thunder because he's put a lot of work into this, but If you recall, last month, we requested council to reject the bids that we had received. We went out to bid, and we had 4 new bids. We've gone through quite the process trying to review all these and make sure we got accurate numbers and that we got appropriate licenses. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike.
Stole my thunder. That's fine. No, correct. Last month we were here. We recommended rejecting the bids for this project. So just a reminder, this project includes about 2 miles of new concrete sidewalk in the number 6 neighborhood along Juniper Creek Boulevard. I know this project's been talked about for a while. We sent it out for bids. We recommended rejecting the bids last time due to some concerns that we had over the contractor and some of the pricing in their bid. We received updated bids on April the 1st. The low bid was provided by a licensed general contractor referred to as Sun Builders in the amount of about a little more than $909,000. However, we had some concerns after looking at the classification in their license and actually pulled Mike Newman into it, and I've actually spoken to the executive director for the licensing board for general contractors, and at the recommendation of both of them, they have concluded that they don't believe this contractor has the appropriate classification to do a standalone sidewalk project. So both have recommended that we reject that bid and move to the second low bidder. You can see from on the screen, the second low bidder is Cole Excavating, a local contractor. Their total bid was $998,495. They do hold the appropriate license to do this work, and staff would recommend that we award the project to them. We have approximately $1.059 million budgeted for this project, so we are within our budgeted amount. There's also around $19,000 left in historic pathways money that I don't believe we have any plans for the rest of this fiscal year, correct, Doug?
That's correct.
So that would leave, if we were able to use that money, that leaves about $1,078,000 available. In the past, for large projects like this, we've asked that Doug be allowed to execute any change orders for the project at his discretion in case we run into something that comes up during construction that we don't have to bring back to you. So the goal would be, if it's awarded tonight, to start in early May. It's a 150-day contract time, and so we would hope to be done late September or early October.
Mike, one thing, with these new bids, I believe Cole Excavating is lower than the bid we had last time.
Correct, by about $20,000, I believe.
John?
And is this winning bidder not the same as the original winning bidder?
The original winning bidder did not bid.
Correct.
And the authorization for the village manager to make, I guess, approve work order changes and all, is there any limitation on dollars amount, or how does that work?
I think we were saying up to the budgeted amount, which is
Okay.
$1.078 million.
Up to the budgeted amount.
Certainly not to exceed what the funds that are already budgeted in this year's, or in this fiscal year's budget.
Thanks. Other questions?
So this is budgeted this year, right?
John or Dr. Morgan, anything else? No? Okay, I think,
I move to approve the Juniper Creek Boulevard Sidewalk Project contract with Cole Excavating for the total base and alternate bid amount of $998,495 and authorize the village manager to approve change orders up to the amount of $1.078 million.
Second.
Brief discussion before we vote.
go right ahead.
I seem to recall when we first talked about this, we thought there was a benefit in separating the pavement marking from the construction.
Yeah.
Their pavement marking is modestly higher, but their overall bid is much less. We decided not to bifurcate and award it as a single contract.
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Right?
This pavement marking, are these the crosswalks?
They are crosswalks. It's
Okay.
17 crosswalks at every place that the sidewalk crosses our existing roads.
Thank you for that number. That's a good number to know, 17. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got what you need. Go right ahead. All right. The second item on regular business is the review of proposed FY26 strategic operating plan and budget. I assume we'll see Dana shortly, yes. Doug, do you want to introduce what's going to be discussed?
Yes, let me pull this up. Hey, Dana will be here to correct anything that I say that is inaccurate, but I'll try to go through this presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Also, we are planning on having a more thorough discussion at our next work session about the budget. So we'll go through it today, kind of give you a high level, and then we can discuss, at the end of this presentation, what we want to do for the next one, if there's any questions or items you want us to look into further.
Just one macro question, Doug, before you get started. We are required, obviously, statutorily to adopt a budget.
Correct.
Are we required to adopt a strategic operating plan?
We're not.
That's just the way Pinehurst has historically packaged this information.
Right, and certainly having a 5-year lookout benefits the village and for planning purposes, but yeah, it's not required.
Thanks.
Okay, so what we'll cover tonight is a little bit what council gave us direction on from the retreats back in December, and then we'll move on to the budget in detail. So we'll cover both revenues and expenditures. We'll talk about the 5-year forecast, and then we'll follow up and finish up with what our next steps will be and what we may want to look into for our next work session meeting in 2 weeks. So hopefully this slide looks familiar to all of you. This is what we base everything we do on here in the village. So we have our 9 balanced scorecard goals, and we have our 21 strategic objectives. So at the retreat, we reviewed all of the 21 strategic objectives to make sure that we were in alignment and we were moving in the right direction. And from that discussion, we came up with this. So we had 4 initiatives that we are continuing to work on. These initiatives are, big items that many different departments touch base on and that the council is well aware of, that we've been working on some of these for several years. And then we also have those 6 other takeaways from our budget retreat. These are opportunities for improvement or innovation that we had, and these are specifically ones that cost money that we built into the budget for fiscal year 26. So diving into the 26 budget, we're proposing a $31 million budget. This is 9.1% less than the amended fiscal year 25 budget. So 9% seems like a lot of money, and you might be wondering what Dana and I have been doing, slashing budgets, things like that. But really, this is just capital items that were in the fiscal year 25 budget that will not be in the fiscal year 26 budget. For example, the synthetic turf is a large one that was like $1.5 million, and the library had approximately $1 million more in the FY25 budget than it does in the FY26 budget. So take those out, and it's not all that much different than the fiscal year 25 budget.
Couple of questions. The 31 million includes the fund balance, but it does not include the, what are we calling the other monies?
The 31 million includes everything.
That's total, okay. But our operating budget will be?
31 million. So we roll in the capital items into the operating budget, so in total would be 31 million.
Right, but a more conventional definition of operating versus capital, 26 and 5, how does that break down?
It's about 4 million in capital in fiscal year 20.
27 and 4, round numbers.
So, that's kind of one of the points I wanted to make, is that we want to make sure that we have stability going forward, and that when we have budgets, that the operating revenue coming in does not, or exceeds the operating expenditures going out, except for capital. So here we have our daily operations and our routine capital. That's going to cost, about the $27 million, and then we have the $4 million in capital on top of that.
But, well, help me. I'm looking back at, I'm looking at the 5-year financial forecast of 2025 to 2029 from the 2025 strategic operating plan. And in that plan, we had about $27 million of operating revenues. And then we had an additional projected ending GF balance of 16.9 million. And I'm trying to understand, do those things get added?
So the general fund balance, so that's like your money that you have left over after the budget year. So
Yes.
Yep, so we had, I'm not sure what the number is now, but at the end of each year, revenues over budget and expenditures less than budget rolls into general fund balance. And so that number may increase or decrease. Usually it increases because we've spent less than we had originally budgeted. So the overall budget is just the 31 million. We're taking 4 million from fund balance to fund it because we have 27 on ongoing revenue.
Let me try asking it again. That 31 million includes all the expenditures that we intend to make.
Yep.
Plus what?
The 31 million is all of our expenditures.
But the money we're not expending, the money that we are saving, or I don't know if saving is the right word, but the money that we are holding in abeyance for future possible projects, where is that reflected in this? That's what's confusing me a little.
Right. So do you recall what our fund balance number is roughly? So
I thought it was about 16. Am I wrong? Wasn't we working off a 16 number at one point in 2025? And we're projecting through 2029. This is last year's SOP to be about 12.1 million.
Yep.
That's what I'm looking from the page 180 of that. So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
So in rough numbers,
Go ahead.
we had the $16 million, and that'll go up or down. It'll go up a little bit because we're going to have 25 leftover money things and
Yes.
revenue come in.
I get all that.
We're taking 4 million of that to add to the 27 million that we have in ongoing revenue, and that gets us to our 31 million.
Okay.
So 31 million is what we're planning on spending next
That's
year.
what we're planning on spending. But what else, where's the rest of that money? The 16 million?
Yep, it just sits in fund balance. So we have and we'll go into this later in the presentation.
Okay.
But we have a policy that we want to keep at least 30% of that set aside for emergencies and other things. And because we know we are going to continue to do a few major capital projects.
Right.
Over time, over the next few years, we're going to spend that down and we'll get to the 30%. So
Okay. So we'll
there's a slide that
sort
might
of
help.
address that. Okay. That's how I've been looking at it for the last few years. So go ahead.
Yep, so the 31 million's broken down like this. So 44% is property tax. That's 8.8% more based on new homes, and we've had roughly 75 new homes each year. I mean, that could change a little bit, but that 0.8% is a rough number that will meet our needs. Also, we're assuming a 1.7% increase in the sales tax, and that's included in the intergovernmental revenues, that 32% there. And then 4 million fund balance appropriation, which we talked about. So that's this 13% here. And these others are relatively small. But we'll kind of dive into those a little bit more here. So property tax revenue, you can see, has stayed relatively consistent over fiscal year 24 through 26 projected. Has gone, in 24, we had a property tax rate of 23 cents. We dropped it to 22.5 in fiscal year 25. And we're looking to keep it the same in fiscal year 26. So that difference in 13.5 million to 13.67 million is just new growth, new tax base in our village here.
Intergovernmental is both the PAL bill and the sales tax, and, okay.
Yep, that's basically the two major things, PAL bill and a sales tax. The permits and fees, that's building permits, planning and zoning fees, and fire district fees. Come up with that. This 800,000.
On the permits and fees, our fire district revenue, is that included in permits and fees, or where does that show up?
Yeah, that is permits and fees.
Answer.
And the decline in interest income as a result of what? Less money in our general?
Well, both. Interest rates going down and less money in our fund balance. Any other questions on these?
Yes, just as a generic comment, particularly when we come back to this in 2 weeks' time or whenever, it's also helpful, in addition to having the FY25 budget, to have the FY actual or year-to-date actual, so we can compare proposed 26 to what we think is actually going to happen this year.
Yeah, so the FY25 budget is Dana's guess as to where 25 will end at.
We prefer the term projection.
No
Yes.
guesses here.
Yes.
But then let's label it that it's not the budget that we actually adopted.
But if you guys had seen Dana's NCAA bracket, you know she is not a very good guesser.
It's busted early, okay.
That was a guess.
Wait a minute, I think that's a low blow. I don't think we need to go there in a council meeting.
All right, okay, I'm following you.
All right, so any other questions on revenue? This, it stays very consistent year to year, not a lot here to look at. Okay, with that, we'll move on to expenditures. So we have here the salaries and benefits cover 55% of our total expenses of the $31 million. So this year we have merit pay increases about 2%, plus cost of living adjustment of 2.9%. So that's roughly $250,000 for the merit pay and about $350,000 for the cost of living adjustments. Also, at our December retreat, we talked about how we were doing a wage study for the village employees. And so we have put in an estimate of a 5% increase for all salaries across the board. We realize not everybody is going to get a 5% increase. Some may be more, some may be less. But that is a number we put in as a placeholder.
When are we expecting the results of the wage study? I mean, but,
Before we adopt the budget.
no problem, okay, that's, I was just wondering, okay.
Would you guess before 2 weeks from now, or not?
Probably not.
Okay.
So our authorized headcount this year that I think started with 165, somewhere like that, 164.9, whatever that means.
Yep.
Is it still 165 for next year, or is it 166?
So we're adding one full-time equivalent, a buildings and grounds employee. That is partially to, because we're building another building, so
Sure,
we
of
need
course.
someone to take care of it. And also, we're doing a lot of walkways and sidewalks, so that'll be extra capacity for that. And we budgeted that position to start mid-year.
The half year, okay.
And does that include the part-time position that we had advertised for related to parking enforcement?
So that's built in as well. Okay. And just as a reminder, the village pays 100% of employee health, dental, vision. When we're expecting a 10% increase in premiums there.
Yeah.
We're doing lots of different options to look at those. So I'll hopefully come in with something less than 10%, but we should be safe with that 10%.
Question, do our neighboring communities, are they 100% health, dental, and vision insurance? Do we know if they are offering the same?
Yeah, we could ask Angie for sure, but I believe that Aberdeen and Southern Pines do something.
Okay, yeah, that'd be worthwhile knowing for sure.
Okay. Okay. So breaking down the operating expenditures. So this is where it gets a little interesting. So the salaries and benefits here, we see quite a big jump from fiscal year 25 budget to fiscal year 26. So
Yes.
as a reminder, the fiscal year 25 budget was Dana's projection, what it would be. So there are some salaries that got taken out of there because we knew that we weren't going to be spending all of them. We've had vacant positions over the course of the year and positions that are currently vacant that we know we're not filling. So that's one reason why that number looks a little bit lower and the jump looks really, really big. But also, it is a pretty big jump because we are adding the 5% in for the wage study plus the COLA and the merit pay.
Question, the 2024 are the actuals, and that was, it'd be helpful to know how many FTE does that represent? So you could probably put that in parens maybe there. And then when you get to the 2025 budget, I guess our FTEs may have been the same number. I'm speculating, or looking at my memory, because I think what I heard you say is that FTEs that we did not fill, the money for their salaries and benefits are not reflected in the 14.6 number. Is that right?
So Dana, you can correct me, but Dana has looked at it and she projected what we thought we were going to spend. So
I understand.
That, yes, some of the positions hadn't been filled for a portion.
But if you were to project the actuals of 2025, because we will have lapsed, I forget our number, 10%, whatever it is, would that 14.6 then drop further?
The 14.6 is the projection through the end of the year based on accounting for positions that have been vacant at some point already during the year,
Okay.
at least as of January when it was done. For example, the FY25 budget had one new position for a stormwater technician approved, and that position has yet to be hired, and so it's assuming $0 for that position, for example.
So the 14.6 projection is based on the current burn rate, what we're spending on FTE, so if somebody's not there, it's not included in that?
Correct.
It's burned. Okay.
Yes.
I got it.
But the fiscal 2026 number is up over 17%.
In essence,
And that's a lot more than 2 plus 2.9 plus 5.
Right.
And I think I also read in the detail, you are proposing to not fill the currently vacant assistant village manager, which would be a higher, on a relative basis, a more highly compensated position than the average. So I'm still struggling to understand. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm struggling to understand why the number is up that much.
Right, and it's a lot, what we've been talking about is that Dana reduced the FY25 budget from the originally proposed budget based on the number of positions that had been vacant through the course of the year. So that number is lower than what we said it would be a year ago for fiscal year 25.
Do you recall what that number was?
The original FY25.
And what I would call the FY budget,
Yes,
the approved number.
Yeah, the budget, the actual FY25 budget right now, which does include some adjustments down for the assistant village manager vacancy, is 15.7 million. So we're projecting 1.1 million less in actual spend, which is pretty consistent with what we've experienced the last several years, is about $1 million in budget to actual variance in salaries and benefits.
So
that's up 9.5.
which is in alignment with.
Yeah.
So that's in line with 2 plus 2.9 plus 5, which you can't really just add all those together, but.
But yeah, it's about a 9.6% increase budget to budget from 25 to 26.
And why does debt, I understood that most of our debt service is actually these lease obligations that we're required to account for as debt.
Yes.
Do we have fewer machines, or why is that number, it's relatively small, but why is it continuing to decline?
It is primarily the software subscriptions, and so as some of them end over time, we're not assuming necessarily that the renewal will also have to be accounted for as that type of software subscription. Many of them then go to a year-to-year renewal, which no longer has to be accounted for as debt service.
So that number
When
would appear.
when it's initial 3-year agreement, then we do. But once it goes to kind of an annual year-to-year renewal, it drops off and we no longer have to account for it as debt service.
But that amount would presumably be an operating
Correct.
expense? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Let me follow up on the debt service numbers. Again, in the SOP from 2025, in FY25, we had $144,000. And at that time, we were projecting for FY26 of $111,000. So in both cases, it's gone up. But I thought I heard you saying sort of it was declining a little because of things
Yes.
expire. So what's the differential?
As we select new software, we do the evaluation of whether it's a subscription that meets the requirements to be recorded as debt service or just as an operating expense, regular operating, we have to wait until we have an agreement to review to be able to make that determination. And so early in this fiscal year, maybe August, September, somewhere in that time frame, we did budget amendments to add additional software subscriptions that we did not know of at the time that we were preparing the FY25 budget. And so that's why it went up from last year's SOP, because there was new software that we didn't know of at the time or didn't have the specific agreement and dollar amounts to know what to record or to plan for in the budget. And so now those are included, but again, as those software subscriptions expire, they drop out of the debt service over time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, moving on to other financing uses, just so you're aware, that's the money that we are transferring to the library capital fund. So last year it was 2.8 million, this year it's going to be 1.9 million. And then the capital expenditures in the general fund, last year was 6.5 million, it's dropping to 3.4 million-ish. We talked about some of those big projects. The synthetic turf was one of those. We had public services land, we had streetscape money, and we had lights for the athletic field that kind of make the difference between that 3.5 million to that 6.5 million. So we have fewer projects in fiscal year 26.
But Doug, given that the library continues to go through the technical review process and so forth, it seems unlikely to me, or would it be fair to say it's unlikely we will actually spend $2.8 million this year? We're just going to run out of time.
Right, so we are going to be putting that money from the general fund into the capital library construction fund. So it'll be in a separate fund to pay the construction bills as they come in next fiscal year.
This would seem like one of the sorts of things that we tend to carry over, what I would call not capital projects approved but not completed, because we run out of time every fiscal year. This is no exception, and we carry that amount over because we're not changing the fact that we've decided to do it.
Correct. So smaller projects, we do that. We just kind of carry it over. But for these very large capital projects, we have created a separate capital account for those. So that's why we're doing it this way. And Dana and I actually talked about, well, do we let that roll forward and then just increase the budget in fiscal year 26? We thought it easier just to keep it in the fiscal year 25 budget and move it to the capital fund.
And moving it to the project fund demonstrates that it's a very real thing that's going to happen. The money has been, it isn't just potential, it's real.
Yes.
Dan, this is also, I think, a result of the fact that we don't really use what I would call true accrual accounting.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And this, it's, as Doug said, once we receive the construction bids, we will have to do a budget amendment for the capital project fund for the library anyway. There's not sufficient funds to sign that contract and send a purchase order to that to whoever wins the construction bid. And at that time, we were also going to include getting approval from council to just transfer the 2.8 million that's budgeted from the general fund this year to move it in this fiscal year. Again, it'll keep the budget cleaner, and then those funds are earning interest that stays within the library capital project fund to help offset the expenditures as well.
So
there is that benefit.
Based upon the bids, the project fund will reflect pretty much the bid and what we actually plan to spend in the end. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other questions on this breakdown? Okay, so we had a previous slide that looked at expenditures kind of by category. Now we're going to look at it by function. So these are our different departments and different areas that we have services that we provide. So I'll go through each of these and kind of highlight what the differences are between what we had approved in fiscal year 25 and what we're planning on doing in fiscal year 26.
Just one generic question. In the transportation, what's under that heading, transportation? What is that, purchases of cars? What is that?
That includes Public Services Administration, Streets and Grounds, and PAL bill.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Under general government and economic development, these are the things that we have looked at changing. So previously, each department had a contingency line of 2%. So that 2% added up to roughly $240,000 in the whole budget. We rarely ever used that, and so as we discussed it, we didn't think it was appropriate to keep budgeting that when it's never being used.
Do we rarely ever use it because of the lapse in our FTEs?
I mean, that's a portion of it, and other expenditures within the budget, more so that we haven't completed all those projects, or, you know, the line items are appropriately budgeted, so there is money for all the activities we were planning on doing.
Okay.
As a practical matter, if a need arose which challenged the budget, then that's likely to come back before us anyway.
Exactly. And we have fund balance, and we have a healthy fund balance, so if there were need for additional appropriation, we can use that for it. Also, we have put in $40,000 within the administration budget to act as a contingency. So we cut it from 240 to 200, and that $40,000 will be available, and that's something we could use if we needed to. And we'd do that likely before we'd come to council and ask for an additional fund balance appropriation. Additionally, we had a $50,000 kind of contingency amount for salary adjustments in the HR budget, and we removed that as well. We have talked about we're not going to do the survey every single year, so that's about $26,000 in savings. We have $45,000 in savings from the vacant planning supervisor position that we will plan on not filling until at least next January. We have.
Let me go back to the, if you don't mind, the salary adjustments.
Sure.
Perfect timing, arriving. Is that saying that we had salary adjustments in our budget that we are not going to make? In other words, we're not going to increase these salaries, so therefore we're not going to spend that money?
So in the past, we would budget for the merit increases and for a cost of living adjustment within every single line. That extra $50,000 was if there was a mid-year adjustment that needed to be made. Say that, you know, a few years ago, people with CDLs were in high demand, and so we went back and we increased their wages to meet the market. And so funding for that could have come from this salary adjustment.
So it was almost a contingency line?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was like a double contingency.
Thank you.
And Doug, do you also feel this is probably not necessary, at least this year, because of the compensation study that you're doing, which presumably will make adjustments as necessary?
That's the hope, yes. Let's see, where was I? Okay, we did add the $45,000 to increase the STR monitoring software, and we put in $200,000 for removing the water tanks. That's still kind of a placeholder. We don't know exactly what we are going to do with those water tanks. There has been the discussion we potentially use them as a salt storage facility, which is later on in the budget, so maybe that'll work out, but we'll still see.
I'm sorry, and going back, not filling the planning supervisor, that is in the planning department,
Yes.
Alex and company.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. We aren't deliberately running with less than full required headcount, are we? And for,
So that position left sometime last summer. I'm not sure exactly when.
yes, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and as we've moved forward, we feel like we're meeting capacity, we're meeting the needs, and no one is overly burdened.
Okay, so service has not suffered, that's the point?
We feel like we're in a good place there.
Okay.
My sense, and obviously HPC is only one small part of it, is that applications have been rising there, that they are busier than they have been in the past, after a little lull period.
I would say that, yes, that's probably true, and with interest rates changing, that might, pick it up a little bit. More projects might happen. But I do think, and per the planning and inspections director, they feel like they're not overly burdened, that they can fill it with the current staffing.
So this is both planning and inspections. It could be either one.
Well, the position is a planning supervisor position that's been vacant. And the last one on there, we did increase one of the part-time code and compliance technicians for 10 hours a week. So that one and the STR software are direct response to one of the priorities that the council gave us at the December retreat. That part-time code compliance tech probably won't be actually doing the STR compliance monitoring, but her supervisor will probably be doing that, and that will give her additional capacity to fill some of those duties. Any other questions? All right, so public safety. So in the fire department budget, we increased it $7,000 to purchase a rescue impact hammer. So that's a really big tool that can break through concrete. If there ever was a need, we'd be able to do that to help with the rescue. And then the 30,000 increase.
Did you say we're replacing one or purchasing a new one?
That is a new purchase. We do not have.
We do not have a rescue impact hammer. Okay.
Small item, but when would we use this? When would we have to break through a wall or something?
Yeah. Well, one example is, was that 2 years ago, the parking deck fell at the hospital?
Oh, yeah.
If someone
Okay.
had been in there, we
Gotcha.
would break it in. Yeah. So this other item is $30,000 increase for stationary license plate readers. That will be 10 license plate readers that will be installed throughout the village. So these are the next step of police enforcement in the new age.
So these are stationary, not in the vehicles, is that correct?
Yeah. So they would be able to tell anytime someone passes one that has an outstanding warrant from another community or has some other tag on their car or their license plate. We'd be notified, police could respond. I think we realize we have a very safe community, and most of the crime in our community is people coming into our community. So I think this is a very effective way to improve our police response and to better protect our citizens.
And how did we determine 10 as a number? Is there why not 5 and then get 5 next year? Or what's the
Volume discount?
I mean, there is a volume discount, but the 10 was working with the vendor, the appropriate number to make sure that we cover all the major ingress, egress points of the village.
And is this a common device that communities have, or is it?
I wouldn't say it's common. It's a little on the cutting edge, so we want to be making improvements. But if you go through a toll booth or things like that, that is something that they already have built in. And,
right.
These are not traffic cameras per se. We're not catching speeders using these, or?
It wouldn't be for catching speed, no. But I mean, it is a camera that looks at your license plate.
Interesting. And they would be used only in the downtown shopping area or all around?
All around the village.
Okay.
So we're purchasing these?
So this would be an ongoing lease.
That's kind of, was my next question. What's the yearly commitment we're doing now?
Yep, so it would be roughly $30,000 each year.
Okay, so $30,000 a year from now on.
Okay, good question, good question.
Yep.
But these are not accounted for as debt.
Not until we see the agreement, then we can make that determination.
Good answer.
We'll certainly we'll probably want to revisit, ask more questions about down the road. Go ahead.
Also, on here, we have next year planning on purchasing 5 police vehicles. That number somewhat fluctuates. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5. So that is a little bit more. I forget how many we purchased last year. I think it was.
What's the ballpark dollar value that we would put next to that? It's not listed there.
I think it's $67,000 per vehicle.
So 5 times 60, so that's 335, yeah.
And to go back on that slide, not that you have to go back to it, but the $30,000, when we have that discussion, I'm also going to want to hear the $30,000 value. We're getting that per year for the village as we're going into, okay, thanks.
Sure, we can prime up the police chief to have that discussion.
Good question. Okay.
All right, in the transportation, solid waste, and fleet area, so we increased the gasoline line by about $40,000. We have $100,000 in the budget for a new salt brine building. We've kind of talked about that for several years now. We have $55,000 for repairs to Building 4 at Public Services. That's the building that the salt is currently stored in, which the salt is eating away the building. And then we have the purchase of 2 garbage trucks in fiscal year '26. Typically, we only buy 1 in a fiscal year. This next year, we're buying 2.
Are they replacements, both of them?
Yes.
What's the lead time on, when do we have to order these things?
About a year.
We plan on that because we know it takes a year every.
We have them in order?
Not yet. And I believe the reason that we were deciding to purchase 2 this year is there's a change to the engine. Is that correct, Carlton?
Yep.
That will make them even more costly. So trying to get another one in before that change is made.
I have a question about curiosity. 40,000 increase in gasoline, is that additional miles or price of gasoline?
The price of gasoline.
Hasn't been declining, the price of gasoline? In some places, it has.
I mean, Dana projects very well, so she looks at, the number of miles that we drive and what the estimated gasoline number is.
Okay.
We buy futures?
No.
Okay.
Okay, well,
No, and for that projection, there's, I forget the name of the source, but there is a source that we use that has projections of what fuel prices will be a year from now, basically, that we use that to estimate based on the current year consumption.
Have our previous projections been off by a significant amount?
We have over budgeted in fuel in previous years. It's usually, the last 2 years at least, it's something that we have been adjusting down at the mid-year amendment. I think the first time that happened, there was a summer where the gasoline price really spiked up. And so from there, we kind of were being conservative with the uncertainty of fuel prices. But I think even the 40,000 increase is compared to what we adjusted the fuel budget down to this year, not from our original higher budget.
let me move on. The salt and brine building, where is that located now, and are we building a new building, or what are we doing there?
Yep, so that will be for a new building, so the $55,000 in the line below it, Building 4. Building 4 is at the Public Services Complex right now. That's where the salt's being stored, and it's eating away at the building. It's a metal building, so it is not a good long-term solution for storing salt. So the $100,000 could either, one, build a new building, or two, maybe we use one of those water tanks as salt storage. One, we have to see if that's actually engineeringly feasible, and also if that's what we want to do in the short term for that area.
Yeah, we need to have a discussion there.
Just to be clear, salt and brine, they're two different, that's not a single thing. It's either salt or brine. Salt, obviously, you have to protect from rain, or it will just melt.
Yeah.
Brine, I assume, is
and
in
Mike's here,
containers.
but and you just add water to the salt.
Yeah, I just figured once the rain came, we called it brine.
Or it gets in the stormwater.
Fortunately, not in the same container, though.
Helpful to know. Go ahead.
The last item on here, the major change is $350,000 for sidewalk connections to the new library. So
The new library.
the new library has as part of the project, we'll have the sidewalk directly in front of the building, but we want to connect it to the police station down here where the sidewalk ends and go up Magnolia Road. Well, hopefully that amount of money will cover that.
Well, help me understand where this is going from the
sorry,
police,
Magnolia to-
from the police station.
On Magnolia, from the police station to the library site.
Okay.
And then ideally, we'd like to go all the way up, finish on Magnolia, and go up Rattlesnake, up to McCaskill.
Oh, so this is from, I get the library, I get the police station to the library. The McCaskill, you're talking about all of Rattlesnake.
Yes.
And will that include doing anything with the utilities that are there?
So I reached out to Duke to ask for an estimate of what that would cost to put those underground. I'm waiting for a response.
Okay.
And I need to meet the engineer on site. I will definitely say that $350,000 will not cover undergrounding the utilities. If we were to do that, it would be much more expensive.
I would like us to break out the Rattlesnake Road item from the police station to the corner of Magnolia and Rattlesnake, so we know what the options are there.
Sure, we can do that.
As we go from the library toward Rattlesnake, would we be going across the piece of property which is now a private home?
Yeah, we'd be going in front of that, yeah.
Well, we can have a crosswalk right in front of the library that connects to a current existing sidewalk.
You go across the street
Correct.
to the north side or west, east
Right, because
side?
there is a sidewalk, a brick sidewalk on the other side of the road.
We can do whatever we'd like. This plan was to put it on the south side of Magnolia, so the whole distance between the police station and the corner would be a sidewalk.
I get that. I get that. I don't, the Rattlesnake one,
Next year's discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, that's that functional area. Moving on to culture and recreation. So with the library, we have $45,000, and that's to get fiber to the new building as well as a new library management software. We're looking at different options there, so that's kind of a potential that's out there. We have $200,000 to rebuild the trail bridge in the Village Acres area along our greenway. And then we have $25,000 for the Timmel Pavilion patio out here. If you've been to it, you'll notice that the area is all dead around it, so we're going to add additional concrete and pavers out there.
What kind of a trail bridge is it for
Yeah.
$200,000?
It's putting basically treks in on the trails on the bridges that are already there.
Where, can you describe where this goes from?
Yep, so in Village Acres, if you follow the Greenway Trail, kind of behind the gym of the First Health area, there's the path back there, so there's trails through, there's footbridges through the wetland areas, and so that will be replacing those and putting in treks or some other long-term solution for those trails.
It's the, in the wetlands, it's extensive.
Yeah, it's a boardwalk through there.
Got it.
And that would not be for all of them. It's going to be funded over 2 years in the plan.
So it was
145 in FY '27 to complete all of them.
So but the total is 200 over 2
So
years?
it's 200 in fiscal year '26, an additional 145,000 in fiscal year '27. Yeah, it's a big project.
On the $45,000 item, I would certainly separate out the library management as something we'll decide we want to do. But fiber would seem to me to be sort of an intrinsic part of the building. It's something physically that's going to be there.
Yeah.
And I just want to be sure that once we get to a point of receiving a bid, that relative to the budget that we all talked about, we know what's included in that and what is not. And I would have no problem separating the management program out from that.
Yeah, we've had that discussion too. So, all right. One thing with the rebuilding the trail bridge, the sidewalk money for in front of the library, and our annual appropriation for sidewalks, we'll cover it in a minute, but those are the highest priorities for capital improvements that we receive from our survey each year. So that's one reason why we're putting money and resources into those. All right, so this is the major capital items that are built into the fiscal year '26 budget. I think we've talked about most of those already as we went through it, but are there any questions on this?
The five
These
police,
the water tanks are the Moore County property that we've acquired, and thank you very much. Now we got to spend $200,000 to pull the tanks down, right?
Yeah, when we purchased them, it was deducted, and we knew that we were going to have to take them down. So that was taken out of the assessed value, but yes.
One of the predicates for this whole discussion is that this was driven out of the December retreat. And there's some of the items on here that we did not discuss. They were not, maybe they were not germane at the time. From a process standpoint, and these are versus the overall capital budget, they're relatively small. But again, from a process standpoint, I think we need to understand how we go about adding things in. Stuff's going to come up all the time. And I'm not suggesting in any of these that we shouldn't rebuild the trail bridges or what have you, but I think we need to be careful how we define what goes into that and what doesn't.
And that's why we have this conversation and our next work session to make sure council is comfortable with putting them in.
The 5 police patrol vehicles are going to be SUVs?
They will
Yes.
be, yeah,
Okay, so we're not doing any more
same that we have.
sedans, okay, thank you.
All right, so this is just the results from our last survey about what are the highest capital needs or capital requests from our community. So additional walkways is the highest. This is broken down by neighborhood. I also broke it down by age and as well as length of residence in Pinehurst. So, but again, additional walkways, number 1. Street lighting is number 2. And we didn't specifically add street lighting money in fiscal year 26 because we hope to complete that in fiscal year 25.
This is an interesting analysis, I think. It kind of tells you that people want you to spend money on stuff outside their front door. You know, walkways and bicycle lanes and street lights and so forth and so on in their neighborhood. You know, they're very much interested in improvements in their neighborhood. Interesting analysis.
Doug, I found the different breakdowns useful, but which one was used to determine the all answers priority? What was the weighting scheme, if you will, that led you to that?
So it wasn't weighted. That's just what, if you count all the responses, that was the highest priority.
It was interesting. I happened to take the one that breaks it down demographically. And I just kind of used the highest priorities 1 and add up the numbers, and the orders is a little bit different there. But what I really found interesting was a couple of things were dramatically different if you looked at 54 and under versus 55 and over. And maybe that will always be the case, that you know, people, but I was surprised that additional athletic fields did not rank higher for 35 to 44-year-olds, who I think still often have kids, or maybe want to use them themselves, either one. And the additional greenways, when you looked at that for below 55 years old, actually ranked 2nd, not 7th or something like that. I'm not suggesting we should do anything differently, but the fact that you broke it down caused me to take a look at some of the different cuts, and you don't get the same answer every time. I think we just need to kind of factor that into our thinking.
Yeah, also I think this question's a little bit maybe difficult for residents to answer because, you know, what's the difference between a walkway and a greenway? Like, I don't know. So,
Right.
Well, and when you give them 12, they probably know what 1, 2, and 3 are, but they can't differentiate between 6 and 7 or what, or they don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about it.
And then I guess, what do you mean by additional parks? I mean, what kind of a park? Where is it located? What are the facilities there? I mean, there's a lot of interpretation goes into the answer sometimes.
right, and what's a park versus an athletic field? That's also a little bit.
It's true. There's doesn't seem to be any hesitation on the lowest priority, regardless of who we're talking to.
Yeah, so athletic fields definitely seems on the low end and walkways on the high end.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
pretty consistent.
Certain things are very clear.
And not only is that consistent in last year's data,
Yes.
it's like the last 10 years.
They're
It's
consistent.
exactly the same.
Our residents have been pretty consistent over the years as to what they think about certain things. Okay. Oh, okay, let's go to the next one.
All right. If you thought you had a lot of questions up to this point, just wait till we go to the 5-year projection. That's where it gets really exciting. So, all right. The 5-year projection is based on these key assumptions. So that fund balance, we want to remain above 30%. We want our operating margin to be about 90%. So operating margin is a kind of a weird concept, but basically we want between the money, the revenue that we bring in and the expenditures less than actual budget, we want that to be roughly 90%. You probably have a better way of explaining that.
The way I think of it is the 90% is that we want 90% of our revenues spent on operating expenditures, and that leaves 10% to use towards capital.
That's
It's
a good way
basically kind of breaking out how much of our revenues each year are we spending on operating versus capital expenditures.
Okay, the next debt service will always remain below 10%. I mean, we're well below that. The 5-year projection includes the following. 5-year forecast for staffing is 4 additional FTEs for the library and 12 for the fire department.
And you're going to show the detail as far as the timing of those, right? Because what would, just off the top of your head, what would the timing of the library staffing be? Because, of course, it depends on when the library's ready.
Yeah.
But,
Yes, so the forecast at this point has one library FTE added in FY '27, when the new library is expected to open, and the archives will at some point be closed for renovation. So we're expecting only one additional person will be needed to fully staff the library at that point. Then once the archives reopens, 3 additional FTEs would be hired. We have that in FY '28.
I will eventually argue for moving that up because I think there's a learning curve on things like the archives and maybe even the library operations and so forth. So we can talk about that later. Thank you.
And then the 12 fire are in FY 2030.
That's contingent upon actually having their facility.
Yes,
That
and
I
so
understand.
what's in, Doug will talk about this, I'm sure. What is in the forecast now is what is the most expensive option, basically, since we do not have the results of the Firebirdie and recommendation yet. But right now, it's factoring in the most expensive option.
As is our conservative way of
Correct.
planning, right?
That is true. However, for the actual salaries of the firefighters, we also assumed that we would receive a SAFER grant.
You'll have to understand that.
Yeah, what is a SAFER grant?
Yeah,
Who
so
gives it to
it's
us?
a federal grant that covers the cost of new firefighters for a municipality, and it's pretty standard. Many communities get this. I think our chances of getting it would be pretty high. So it pays 100% of the cost of a firefighter for the first 3 years that they are on board with us.
First 3 years, did you
First
say?
3
Okay.
years.
And after that?
Then the village picks up the cost 100%.
That's a pretty big
So
number.
in this 5-year forecast, there are actually no firefighter salaries that
I
play
saw
into
that.
it. that
Effectively
play
added,
into it.
yes.
Very clever.
But where did, the number 12, is that 9 for a possible new station plus 3 more in general, or, because I thought it was 3 shifts of 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the minimum. And then the additional 3 would be at that third fire station. But they could also cover deficits that are in the other stations. So Derek has talked about how there's a hiring factor, like, about 10% of employees' time, they're not going to be there because they're going to be on vacation or sick. And so, if you have a minimum of 3 and you have to have 3 to put the fire out, then you need another to cover them sometimes.
No, without going too deep into the weeds on this, I spent an hour and a half or so with Chief Gluston 2 weeks ago, and the thought occurred to me that given, assuming we could hire them at all, that having what I would call 1 or 2 bodies that could be floaters or could be there to be sure that we can cover when there are unforeseen circumstances or vacations might be worth going into, totally separate from whether we build a third fire station.
Yeah, and in our Birdie discussion, which we haven't finalized yet, that was the thought that, okay, we have the minimum of 3 per shift plus the additional 1, which would cover that one and could potentially help offset, the needs in other places as well.
So again, it's hypothetically, it's 9 in a new fire station plus 3 on top of that
Yeah.
for somewhere.
Initially, they would be scheduled to be at the third fire station.
I'd be interested in a lot more detail on this SAFER grant. What other communities utilize it, or have utilized it? How much has the federal government given out in the last several years? And we don't know what the new administration is going to be doing regarding SAFER grant.
That is probably the biggest concern. with
That is
SAFER
a
grants.
big bet.
Over time, it's been pretty standard, and most everyone that applies that meets the given criteria will receive.
And what is the criteria? Because we have such a good track record regarding fires. I mean,
Well, it's mostly just you say you need them.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
All right. Well, just to finish out this slide, there's some key financial assumptions: 1% growth in real and personal property taxes, plus we assumed that there would be an eventual annexation of Phase 4, and Dana has timed that out, so not all of that is in this 5-year plan, but the initial build-out of that is. And then,
But that's a separate amount from the 1%. The 1% is the increase on, I'll call the existing stock, and then that's on top of that.
correct. And then we have base salaries and benefits increase, and then 2% inflation rate for operating costs. Okay, so we kind of already talked about most of this stuff. So what is included in the 5-year plan? The completion of the library and the archives and the additional staffing for that. The construction and staffing of the 3rd fire station, and I mentioned the SAFER grant. And then the list of capital projects that's on the next slide. What I did not include in this 5-year plan is the relocation of the public services complex. So in December, we discussed that that was not going to be in the 5-year plan. Kind of coincidentally, things are kind of moving at the Village Place now, so this is something we may want to consider in the next 5-year plan. Also, any infrastructure improvements in Village Place that would somewhat be associated with the public services move. Downtown parking facility is not included. At the retreat, we discussed, give us a year to implement timed parking, see how that goes, and then we would have better data on whether or not that is a birdie that we need to pursue. And then the last one is multimodal improvements above our operationalized $470,000. So that is again, the #1 requested improvement. We did not do anything more than the $460,000.
What are the multimodal improvements that are not included? In other words,
right. So the BPAC is coming up with a multimodal plan. So some of their high priorities are a connection between Southern Pines at Forest Creek along Airport Road back down to the Village.
that's not included now.
That's not included in here.
But aren't they beginning some construction there now? What am I thinking about that pathway that we've talked about at the SMPO that isn't?
So we're asking SMPO to fund that project, but it is not built into our 5-year plan.
Okay.
There's been discussion of creating a pathway along the west side of NC5,
Yep. So that is also not built into this 5-year plan.
but that would qualify as you're envisioning that as a multimodal pathway, golf carts, bicycles, pedestrians.
So the major projects that are built into the 5-year plan are on here.
Help me.
Sort of the elephant in the room potentially is when we get the bids back on the library.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That could, it could revise things, I guess. Hopefully won't.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
No.
And Doug, the infrastructure improvements in Village Place, I had always assumed that there would be some sort of negotiation between a hypothetical developer who wanted to come in with a proposal and.
Yes, so that is true. There would be some sort of negotiation that, we own a lot of property. We probably don't want to put a lot of money into the infrastructure, so maybe there's a negotiation there. But I do think as we look at that more closely, I think there will be an expectation for either a parking or for us to put some of the road infrastructure in. So that's something we need to consider as we move that forward.
Going back to the survey of our residents, I'm highly skeptical of the $743,000 for West Pinehurst Park. I mean, I don't know what's involved in that $743,000, but we just went through where additional parks and additional athletic fields are
Low.
Yeah, so
matter of fact, the neighborhood closest to there, they've listed them also as low, so closest to the park.
yeah, at the December retreat, that $743,000 has been set aside for doing an artificial turf on the little baseball field in Cannon Park.
I get that. I remember
I had
that.
discussed that, moving that money from there and making improvements to West Pinehurst Park.
Wow, okay. Okay, well, we can discuss that further, but
But I think that could be a candidate for the capital budgeting decision-making process. If we're not going to do it in West Pinehurst Park, let's take that off. If we're going to do it somewhere else, let's put that on so that it reflects what we think we're actually going to do.
Yeah, well, I thought that is what we decided to do, but,
And
but
I don't
it's always
remember
open
any-
for rediscussion.
again, is not the largest item. I don't remember any discussion in the past of hockey rink lights. Not
I
expressing an
don't remember
opinion.
that, but I'm curious about the hockey rink. How often is it used a lot? Someone asked me the other night, do you have a hockey rink? I've heard that. And I said, yes, we do. And they said, well, how is it? Is it ice all year? How do you do this? And I said, I'll have to find that out. So here we are. Tell me about the hockey rink.
Well, it is not ice, it's only
Oh, it's an
roller.
inline skating.
That's why.
Street hockey.
Yep. So I actually asked Parks and Rec this question. It's about 5 hours a week that the lights are on, so about an hour a day, or every other night for a couple hours. So
It's pretty cool, and it's used, sufficiently, I'd say. It's definitely
$10
it's definitely a
or
unique
lights out.
asset. You don't see many of those around.
Okay.
Tell me about the U.S. Open expenses. Have we negotiated for our 2029 open expenses yet? So what's going on here?
So we have not negotiated
The licensing
the
agreement.
licensing agreement, but that is roughly the amount that the village spent with all of our preparations and doing the activations downtown during that time period. And actually, I think
Wouldn't we try
increased
to
it.
negotiate to cover our expenses?
That is an option. And I think actually we increased that, assuming it's going to be 2 weeks and not just 1
Right,
week.
of course, that's the ways out, but something to keep in the horizon.
All right.
Here, question.
I'm sorry, I had one other note here, going back to the 5-year staffing forecast. I recall, I think it was the planning retreat right after Barb and I came on the council, where the only projection for staff increase was 4 for the library. I asked at the
Correct.
time whether that seemed reasonable,
Correct.
given increase in population and other programs that we might like to offer. We're basically not projecting any increase in staffing, other than possibly in the fire department.
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. We have the buildings and ground employee that we're adding this year, but in the 5 years, that's correct.
I still find that surprising if it turns out to be true, but it may, so that'd be good. I'm all for efficiency.
So I will say, as the actual budget year gets closer, the amount of requests increase dramatically. So we'll see.
Why am I not surprised?
I think there's a great early view of the potential budget. I think you're probably very close.
Great. And I will hurry and finish, but I think this is an important slide to look at. And I don't want to scare anyone, but the green is revenues, and the yellowish is expenditures. So in the past, that difference between the revenues and expenditures, we've been able to do extra capital projects. So as you look going forward, 27, 28, and 29 are real close, and so that means that the amount of money that we have available for capital projects is getting squeezed. And in 2030, we're actually we have a potential deficit in 2030.
Leaving
I
aside,
don't find this alarming. It's like we're going to live within our means. I don't find this alarming at all.
but these also did bake in some tax increases in out years, and they ignore the fact that we historically have outperformed. Whether it's through the salary lapse or what have you, we've tended to have revenues exceed expenditures.
And is there anywhere where we sort of bake in the property value reassessments that are coming up in a couple more years?
On this slide, we do. All right, so in this proposal, we have maintaining the current tax rate of 22.5 for fiscal year 26 and 27. Fiscal year 28 is the revaluation year. And so at the revaluation year, we typically do an inflation adjustment to cover between the last time that we had a revaluation and the current revaluation. So
if everyone's property value increases, we're saying we're going to increase your tax rate. Whereas last time, when everyone's
Right,
property
so-
values increases, we said, we're going to reduce your tax rate.
Right, so that is what will likely happen, is that the values go up, and so
Yes.
we're able to adjust. But what we're saying here is, assume evaluations stay exactly the same, we're going to need to build in some sort of inflation adjustment, because the last 4 years, we've had a lot of inflation.
That's an interesting assumption, because I don't think we can assume at all that they're going to remain all the same.
Right, since we have no idea what direction the tax base valuation will go, we know at the end of the day, we'll adjust the tax rate to a point where our tax levy, where the revenue that comes in, increases by the equivalent of about 1 cent on the tax rate.
But that's also dependent on what capital project decisions we make. There's some decisions in here that if we don't go forward with them at where they're situated, we're not going to need to cover the costs for them. And there's
And I would argue that is true, but I would argue capital is not so much the issue, because we can always choose not to do a capital project. It's the growth in the operating that really puts the pressure on the tax revenues.
Or we can choose to finance the capital expenditure a different way.
Correct.
I mean, we've ignored, or not ignored, but we've avoided financing our capital expenditures forever, as far as I can tell. And maybe at some point in time, certain capital expenditures that benefit the future may be best financed by the future.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. Dana is correct that it's the operations side that's putting the pressure on this. Also, most of those major capital projects are towards the later end, in 29 and 30. So.
All the more reason for us to look more critically at them. Are we really going to do them or not?
Right.
Agreed.
And
I think under the guise of forecasting conservatively, I think it would be conservative to assume some increase in tax valuation, but I wouldn't assume a very big number. Certainly nothing similar to what we saw last time. You're assuming 1% elsewhere in kind of our own domestic collections based on new homes built or what have you.
Remind us of what was the average increase in the property tax valuation 2 years ago?
50%.
50%, okay. So if we cut that in half, it's only 25%. But that's a pretty big hike.
Yeah.
From my perspective,
Yes.
because at the end of the day, what impacts the forecast is the tax dollars coming in, the tax levy revenue. It's simpler to adjust the tax rate and assume the tax base stays flat rather than adding an additional variable to the analysis. At the end of the day, you're getting the same result in terms of the impact to the revenue.
I think it goes back a lot to the decisions we end up making as to the type of commitments we're going to place on the Village of Pinehurst, whether it's betting on the SAFER Act to cover costs of who we hire, 9 people, whether it's building out the turf in West Pinehurst Park. There's a bunch of items here that I think we really need to carefully, and we will. We'll have an opportunity to look at them and discuss them, but every decision we make, even if it's downstream, starts to impact these costs, whether they're operating costs because of FTEs, whether they're servicing debt, if we decide that that's a useful way to finance a project or two.
And I think we have made some assumptions on the use of debt.
We adopted a policy.
I think in the relocation of the public services complex, and maybe in Station 93, although much more of that cost is the compensation cost than it is the construction cost.
Yes, so in the forecast now, we assume that the construction of a third fire facility is funded by debt. And since the public services relocation is not in the plan, there's no debt for that, but that when it was in the plan previously, it assumed
the number I remember from a previous presentation was $8.9 million for that third fire station.
Yes, I think at the
Roughly correct,
retreat.
yeah.
What's that?
That's the number we've been looking at.
Okay, so that's Adjusted for inflation, let's say it's 9 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Of which
Yeah.
the bulk is compensation, it is not capital.
That's,
No,
That's the
That's just
cost
the
of the building.
construction.
that's cost of construction. Okay.
$9 million to build the building,
That's
before we hire the 9 people to staff it.
That's correct.
12 people, but yeah.
yes.
Yeah, the 12 people, right. Okay, so I'm just,
And
and we'll
give
get
me-
to discuss that in detail, but that's a big number.
And
I mean, what
we should look at that very closely. So this has a lot of information on this slide. I just want to point out 2 things. So revenue in FY '26, 27 million. In FY 2030, a little over 30 and 3/4 million. All right, so then you look at, so that goes up by roughly 3.5 million increase. The operating expenditures go from about 26 million to about 32 million. That's almost a $6.5 million increase. So that is why I showed that graph earlier that, our expenditures are growing faster than our revenue. And this is something, we don't need to panic at this point, but something we definitely need to keep in mind and make sure that.
But, okay, good point. Thank you for bringing it out. But if our biggest expense, and appropriately so, I think, is the salary and benefits.
Right.
And they're not going to decline.
Nope.
They shouldn't decline. Now, in the operating, the second biggest expense is the operating portion of our expenditures, which was 27%.
Yeah.
And
So-
what do we list under operating? I know what salary and benefits are off the top of my head. Operating are buying.
Operating is everything else, contracted services, landfill fees,
The light bill.
supplies, computers,
Okay,
yep,
Eh,
everything, pretty much
support-
everything else that's not salaries and benefits or capital.
gotcha.
So on this specific slide, operating expenditures here includes both personnel costs and all of the regular operational costs. So,
Okay, so that operating is included. So that gets you to the 82%. So it's 82 cents on every dollar is in those 2 categories. Okay.
okay, so and then we had the percent of fund balance that's remaining. That number, we want it to remain above 30%. We're very close. That looks like it's appropriate. But our estimated operating margin, we wanted to be about 89 to 92-ish. And so the last couple of years, as we've discussed, we got pressure from increasing operating costs and the revenue's not keeping up with that. So that's why that is showing in red. All right.
But it's certainly impacted by capital. Go ahead.
Okay, so as we go forward, we owe you a decision on the third fire facility. Also, in the next year, we've talked about redevelopment of Village Place, so we need to analyze, is that something that we need to build into the next 5-year plan? So both that one and the need for a downtown parking facility. We'll do some analyzing, put those on as birdies for fiscal year '26, so we can build them into fiscal year '27 through '31 budget.
I'd like to raise a possible suggestion, and I'll defer to staff if they think this is wise. When you get to the redevelopment of Village Place, including the potential capture of taxes from Village Place going off our payroll and going on to our tax roll.
And we will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I also,
It probably won't happen within the 5 years, but
No, I
Yes,
understand.
but yes, it would
I
absolutely be
like
part of
an
the
idea.
analysis,
What is
yeah.
what is that going to add to our coffers?
I know that's contingent on how quickly we could find a new site to relocate.
It's all
So,
contingent on that.
I mean, the model that I built takes that into account.
Yep.
I would, with respect, I think in some of the preparatory notes to this discussion, Doug, you said we're still on the Birdie for the third fire facility. We're still waiting for some GIS data from Aberdeen and Southern Pines. What is it that when we get that information, what is it that we hope that will tell us that we can incorporate into our decision-making?
Yeah, we can certainly make a decision pretty much on the data that we have already. But what I'm hoping to be able to is compare ourselves to them as far as, right now we respond to about 70% of our emergency calls within 6.5 minutes. I want to see what Southern Pines and Aberdeen do. Because, depending on what option we choose, if we build a third fire station or if we do another option, that'll change the percentile that we get within 6.5 minutes.
And they're not already tracking that, apparently, because otherwise they could have just given those numbers, or?
No, they track it differently. They track it as an average.
Okay.
So it's not that we should be able to get that data. It shouldn't be that hard.
Okay.
But simplistically, what we would like to see is from their station to where all the calls are, that routing, that's what you need the GIS data for.
Yep.
To compute the response time in a way that is apples and apples with the way we compute it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good.
All right, so we talked about a lot. Hopefully, we have met the priorities within the fiscal year 26 budget that we discussed at our December retreat. So what I'd like to do now is, what would you like us to plan and present to you in 2 weeks from now? So we had a couple of suggestions about, discussion of the $30,000 for the police department for the LPRs. Are there any other specific questions on the 26 budget that you'd like more detail?
On the 26 budget alone, hold on. There's so many
And you don't have to give this to me now. You could
No.
email me the next day or two.
Yeah, I am interested in the sidewalk costs.
Oh, for
The library
dividing
part?
that up between Magnolia versus
Yeah.
Rattlesnake.
It's only one thing that keeps popping into my head, and I don't think we have to necessarily do it, but what is the plan B, in fact, if in fact the library comes in at 20% more than our plan was?
So there are several options. One, we could value engineer it down and remove some of the things that were.
I mean, we can
requested.
talk through that. We don't have to do it right now.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, that's an item that I think just on some general discussion might be useful. Although I don't want to speculate, because who knows what the
Yeah, no,
number may, I may hopefully be happily surprised that it's perfect.
Hopefully, we are, but I think that remains a major priority. It's a commitment that the council has made to do something regarding the library.
exactly.
So if that would,
Subject to a budget.
subject to the budget, but if we have to be flexible, we should be flexible with these future ideas that are floating out there. I think, rather than trying to squeeze the library too much.
Oh, no,
I'm
I
not saying-
can't, I don't want to backtrack. I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Yeah, I would agree. The projects that we are already invested
Yeah,
in,
we've
we should
come
probably
a-
move forward on before we,
we've come a long way on that, and,
I meant financial plan B, so to speak.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks' time, I guess, we began this discussion, which you described as preliminary, at 10 after 5. So we've been at it for an hour and 20 minutes. And we have the detailed budget discussion coming up. From a process standpoint, are you hoping that what we did today will shorten that 2 weeks from now, so we don't have to go into this? I'm happy to go into all the detail once.
Yeah.
I hope we don't have to go into all the detail twice.
Yeah, so what I envision the next meeting is, any specific questions on the fiscal year 26 budget, like this police thing or the sidewalks, we can have a few answers. I don't think that will take that long. And then from there, in the 5-year plan, if there are different options you want us to consider, if you want to say, let's not be conservative with the most expensive route for the fire department, like take it out completely or something like that. Let us know, we'll run that scenario and we can show it to you.
okay, I definitely will have some suggestions, somewhat like we did last time, where we take the 5-year plan, and you add and subtract certain items and see how it hits those two bottom lines.
Yep.
So that is something I will email,
Yep,
okay?
so that's probably the best
5-year
way.
one.
If you have options that you want us to consider or
Yes.
something you want us to look into more in the FY26 budget, email me and/or Dana, and we will make sure that that
Okay.
is prepared and we can have a succinct discussion on that.
Fair enough. I think one of the things we need to have a discussion on is the maybe awkward discussion of these moving parts that are sort of connected to each other, like the water tanks and the public services complex and the building, the salt and brine storage building. These things are sort of, there's dotted lines connecting them all. And so and I don't know if it's really possible that we can firm up some things in the next 2 weeks or so, but it may be in the next 4 weeks. If we can firm up a few more things, it might make it more useful to us as we try to make decisions.
Yeah, certainly anything we can firm up in the next 4 weeks, we will. I don't think we'll really have a good answer on the salt facility, but.
Yeah, I know. I forgot, I didn't know about the salt.
Maybe a little more details on the salary is something that we need to get a good feel for.
On the salary?
The wage study and what increase that might be.
Absolutely, the wage study, sure. Because that does impact, it does impact 26, right? Yes. That wage study, if we get the results in the next month or so, hopefully, that will make an impact on 26. It's certainly also down the road, but that's an immediate impact on our budget.
Right.
Okay, well, this has been very helpful.
I'm also reminded of one thing that I think we discussed in the retreat, which is shortening the actual report that comes out of this, hopefully demonstrably.
So
200 and some odd pages, and I believe I described it as incomprehensible to the mere mortals who don't have to sit and go through this all the time.
Yeah, I think what is more likely to happen, that's a pretty set standard that we'll probably do a comprehensive document like that, but then have a shorter people's version of it.
The people's version?
Well, a popular version of it. Like.
If you have suggestions, I would love to hear them. If you
Delighted
have
to provide
suggestions
them.
for
I have a couple. I do think thinking longer term, whether it's October or December, whenever we go back to our next strategic retreat, that we do think about the implications of expenses, operating expenses rising faster than projected operating revenues. That's not a long-term sustainable position to be in for any business.
Right.
Well, I totally agree with that. The biggest thing here when we talk about taxes and costs to our constituents is what are we spending, period. It always comes back to spending. And I think we can do ourselves some favors. I know, John, you've alluded to this before, but that's making some decisions on some of these capital expenditures. And instead of playing kick the can, which I'm not saying just this council, but it seems to have been a recurring game for councils in the past. Instead of actually taking stuff off, they just want to kick the can down the road. And I think it'd behoove us to actually cut some of these things out of here.
I think it's a good point, really good point.
And agreeing with that, there are also a couple of significant, but not the most major items. I mean, we've got rebuilding Cannon Park out 3 or 4 years from now at $500,000. If we're going to do it, it's going to be less expensive likely to do it now than in 3 or 4 years.
Cannon Park? Rebuilding Cannon Park?
I'm sorry. Camelot.
Okay.
Beg your pardon. I misspoke.
No problem.
And we don't have the detail in front of us, but you look at that as what's the expected life cycle of the previous stuff, and what's the life cycle of a slide? I've got no idea. Okay, but we're relying on the staff for that, and if that's when it actually needs to be redone, I can understand that on the cycle with it. And those are questions we need to have. I'm not as concerned about that and refurbing something that we have and maintenance type of stuff.
I agree with that.
Than I am talking about new stuff, because new stuff then has that recurring expense, and when for the example, we talk about West Pinehurst Park, $750,000 or whatever the case is that's being looked at that. I have huge flares that are going up right now saying, is that a justifiable expense right there? Can we just remove that instead of kicking the can down the road? Okay, and so we can have that discussion. But that's the example I'm looking at.
I agree.
A good example. I agree with that.
Yep. So if there are any ideas like that, please send them to us so we can incorporate them into scenarios.
All right, well, this has been a good discussion, and I think we can, hopefully you all have got a little more concept and direction of some of the questions on the minds of the council. and we'll provide you some additional input, and we'll look forward to the next session. At our next council meeting, are we going to re-engage in the work session, or are we going to, what are we going to do?
Yeah, so on the 22nd, we will have a work session, discuss this in detail.
Okay. That sounds,
Hopefully, we are able to cover it, and everyone's happy, and we all sing Kumbaya at the end. But if not, we can also add another meeting in between now and when the budget actually needs to be adopted.
and one of the things we can do is we can certainly narrow the items that we haven't resolved down to the tiniest list possible, so that budget preparation work can begin, and you don't have to wait for every single decision before you can really start putting the pen to paper on that. I assume that's how you work anyway.
Yeah, that's the hope with the timing of the meetings and the intention of each meeting this year, is that we have the majority of your input and decisions done in April through that work session. And then that way at the May 13th meeting, when the SOP document, the draft, is released with the proposed budget and 5-year forecast, it already incorporates, hopefully, any decisions you've made up to that point, any feedback that you have given. If something else arises after that, we will make adjustments. But we're not planning to have like the daytime separate budget work session where we flipped through the SOP document in detail this year. We were hoping that this meeting and the work session at the next meeting would ultimately achieve the same goals of getting your input into any changes you want made to our recommended budget.
What is the anticipated date for the, I'll call it the public hearing, where the public comments and all? Do we have a specific date like on that?
Yeah, May 27th is the public hearing.
Second meeting in May, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So those of you who are listening online, if you have suggestions, and please forward them to council members or even or to staff, because not all the knowledge resides on these 5 chairs up here for how the Village of Pinehurst should pursue things. So thank you. All right. Anything? Well, I'm willing or ready to move on to other business and then take a quick break.
Thanks, Dana. Good job.
Thank you.
Before we go to the work session. So other business that anyone wants to raise? Okay. Why don't we break for, was that 7 minutes till 6:45?
Yeah, we should.
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Second.
Aye.
Done. See you back in about 7:45. Is that 7? Yes. Well, that was a good discussion.